Okay, to pick up where we left off, um, I had this silly image that they're like a superhero that they activate and transform in a moment of danger because it's such a big dramatic change they go through. Um, so anyway, this is a picture of activated platelets, and they've been activated by some kind of tear, and they become prickly looking. They're actually called sticky platelets. Activated platelets are sticky platelets, and the reason they're called sticky is because they stick to each other and they clump up. They pile up in this big clump, which is actually called a plug. It's called a platelet plug. Oh, here, it's written here also, platelet plug. And that is the first step of a blood clot. This pile of sticky platelets is the first step of a blood clot. And, sorry, my thing jammed. I couldn't change slides. Okay, so blood coagulation is super complex. There's like many proteins. I think it's more than 13, which are in your blood. And it's extremely delicate process because if you clot too easily, it's a disaster. If you don't clot enough, it's a disaster. You can bleed too much. So it's a really delicate, complex process. We're not going to study much of it at all. We're only going to study platelets and this one protein called fibrin. Okay, so in coagulation, what happens is platelets get activated and they form a platelet plug. Fibrin gets activated and fibrin becomes fibrinogen. You might recognize it's a zymogen ending because it gets activated, right? When it becomes fibrinogen, it gets all stringy and messy. It forms almost like a net, which catches and tangles up blood cells so they can't get by. So this would be blood cells. It looks like they're moving almost in the direction out of the screen if they were following their flow. But this fibrinogen is forming a net which holds them back. And so it slows down blood loss from a wound and eventually stops it. Okay, so this is kind of a visual summary. Resting platelets, which get activated sticky platelets. This is fibrinogen. This is a little way to help you memorize it. It's the word sounds kind of like fibers, right? Like the nets of a fiber. Okay, how does their body know when to do this, when to start clotting? In fact, it's really important that I do it at the right moment because if you get blood clots when you're not bleeding, that's really harmful. Blood clots can cause a lot of problems. They can cause heart attacks. They can cause problems in your lungs. Actually, anywhere they go, they cause problems. So how does your body know when to do it? Blood vessels have a substance called collagen. I'm sure you've heard of collagen. We've talked about it before. It's a structural protein. It gives flexibility and it gives strength to the structure of our skin, to tendons, to ligaments, to blood vessels, to other body parts too. It's in the blood vessels, and here's the trick. It's not on the inner lining of the blood vessels. It's not the part that touches the flowing blood. It's inside of the blood vessel's walls. So the blood is not touching it unless a blood vessel rips or tears. When a blood vessel rips or tears, then the collagen is exposed. And the collagen is what activates the platelets and the fibrin. So you see, it's a genius of a method. It's very simple. It's something found within inside the wall, which will activate them. So that means it'll only get activated when there's been a blood vessel tear. Activates also all those other changes that we're not learning about. A little note, fibrinogen, we see it, right? We saw it right here. Fibrinogen is this net. We saw an unactivated platelet and an activated one. We can't see unactivated fibrinogen. In other words, fibrin. We don't see fibrin because it's dissolved in the blood. So just like you don't see sugar in your tea, you can't see fibrin until it becomes fibrinogen. All right, this is really cool. These are all the steps to what occurs when there is blood vessel injury. So injured blood vessel exposes the collagen, which chemically triggers clotting. The other thing that happens, this is new, we haven't talked about this, is it very briefly causes vasoconstriction, constriction of the blood vessel. Why do you think it does that? Because it slows down blood flow so that it decreases your loss of blood. So because of their exposure to collagen, platelets are activated and they become sticky platelets and form a platelet plug. Then fibrinogen gets activated, forms fibrin, and the tangled fibers make a sort of a net which block the blood cells and stop the flow of blood. And so the first step is platelet plug, and then it's a clot. And that's the whole deal. The last part of blood that we didn't talk about is, there's not much to it. It's plasma. It's the liquid medium, the medium in which all the cells and proteins are floating in. They're suspended in it. Plasma is mostly made of water. It's like 95% water. It's this clear yellowish color. They have observed it. They observe it all the time. They do this when they draw blood and they do tests. They put blood in a tube, then they put it in a centrifuge, which means they spin it super duper fast. And the blood cells separate from the white blood cells and the platelets, which are in that white layer, from the plasma, which is this largest of all yellowish layer. So that's explained here, the exact percentages. It's kind of cool. So they can do this. It just takes spinning to separate these parts out. And what's happening with plasma? Plasma has lots of dissolved substances inside of it because remember, it's a transport and delivery, right? That's its purpose. So what does it have dissolved inside of it? It's things you'll recognize. We talked about this when we talked about interstitial fluid. Ions and electrolytes, right? That means ions and electrolytes are like Na+, K+, Cl-, chlorine, sodium, potassium, etc. All those. Hormones, chemical messages, nutrients, glucose, amino acids, vitamins, all kinds of things. And all these things are delivered to the cells, all the things that you need. It also carries waste products like CO2, which will be delivered to the lungs, urea, which will be delivered to the kidneys. And lastly, it has many specialized proteins. We just learned about fibrin, one of them. And that is the whole deal. Oh, I wanted to look at this last. This is a real photograph of a blood smear, and it's a very realistic one. The other one was a little bit too unrealistic. It had too many white blood cells. So if you see it, this is the right proportion. Great quantity of red blood cells. Can you find the platelets? Right, the little tiny platelets here, just flowing along until they get activated. And then you can obviously see the white blood cells are in much lesser proportion, much lesser quantity. I know I have lots of photographs, but I think these photographs are so cool. Here again, they added the color, but it is a real photograph, and this is your work. So do this and turn it into me by Friday afternoon or evening, and that's it. Take care, girls. Hope you're well.